Heads up, this video has full spoilers for the final chapter of the amazing digital circus, so if you haven't watched it yet, go see it first and then come back. For years, JAX was one of the most mysterious characters in the amazing digital circus. He hid behind sarcasm, pushed people away, and never let anyone see who he really was. But in the final chapter, that finally changed. JAX opened up, confronted his past, and for the first time showed a side of himself we had never seen before, which makes his ending all the more heartbreaking. So I want to build this whole video around one question, because I think it's the key to understanding everything that happens to him. Did JAX finally manage to change right at the moment when it was already too late? Because here's the thing that keeps echoing in my head. The tragedy of JAX isn't really that he abstracts. The tragedy is that he starts to heal right before it happens. And once you see it through that lens, his entire arc hits completely differently. Let's start with the JAX we all thought we knew. Because for most of the series, he was pretty easy to write off. He was the joker, the troublemaker, the selfish one, the guy who never seemed to take anything seriously. And honestly, maybe you saw him that way too. I think a lot of the audience did. He was the character you rolled your eyes at, the one causing problems while everyone else was trying to survive. But the final episode takes that image and completely dismantles it. Because it turns out that behind all the sarcasm and all the cruelty, there was someone who had been hiding for years. And the moment you realize that, you can't look at any of his earlier behavior the same way again. The heart of all this is a conversation he has with Ribbit. And I'd argue it's the single most important scene in his entire arc. And here's what's so interesting about it. The big deal isn't actually the information he reveals. The big deal is that he chooses to reveal it at all. For the very first time, JAX talks about his family, about how things fell apart after his parents divorced. He talks about ending up on the streets with no home. He talks about a moment he deeply regrets, pushing his mother and running away, never knowing what happened to her after. And I want you to really sit with how huge that is for a character like him. Because for almost anyone else in the circus, opening up like that would just be a normal, honest conversation. But for JAX, someone who built his entire personality around never being vulnerable, telling Ribbit the truth is basically an act of trust. It's him lowering a wall he'd kept up for years. But here's the detail that turns this from touching into genuinely tragic. Almost the instant JAX opens up, he regrets it. And honestly, I think this is one of the most human things the show has ever done, because so many people watching will recognize this feeling immediately. You open up to someone, you let them in, and then this wave of embarrassment hits you, and suddenly all you want to do is pull away. That's exactly what JAX does. He starts avoiding Ribbit, dodging her, shutting her out. But, and this is the part that matters, he doesn't push her away because he doesn't care. He pushes her away because he cares too much, and he has absolutely no idea how to handle feeling that exposed. He'd rather lose the connection than risk being seen. And that's where Ribbit's side of this becomes its own quiet tragedy. Because if you look at it from her perspective, it's heartbreaking in a completely different way. From where she's standing, JAX finally opened up. She thinks they actually grew closer, that they crossed some kind of line together. And then, out of nowhere, he just emotionally vanishes. She keeps trying to reach him, keeps trying to talk, but he won't respond. And she never fully understands what's going on or what she did wrong. And little by little, you can see her sinking, feeling worse and worse, until it reaches the moment we all know is coming, and Ribbit abstracts. The cruelest part is that both of them genuinely wanted to be close to each other. They both wanted that connection, but neither one of them could ever say what they were actually feeling out loud. And that silence is what destroyed everything. After Ribbit is gone, we get to what I think is the real emotional core of his character, which is guilt. Because suddenly, JAX can't hide anymore. He can't slip behind the sarcasm. He can't pretend nothing affects him. He can't keep acting like he doesn't care, because the proof that he cared and that it went horribly wrong is right there. And for the first time in the entire series, he has to actually face the consequences of his own choices. There's nowhere left to run, and no joke big enough to cover it up. We learn later that this guilt over Ribbit's fate never left him. He carried it the whole time, buried under all that bitterness we used to think was just his personality. Which brings us to the question everyone's asking, why does JAX abstract? And here's where I want to offer my own interpretation, because I don't think it's as simple as him just being sad that Ribbit was gone. I think he abstracts precisely because he finally lowered all of his defenses. Think about how he survived for years. He survived by hiding his emotions, by running from any real conversation, by pushing people away before they could get close. That was his entire armor. And the moment he finally stops doing that, the moment he lets himself actually feel everything, all of that emotional weight he'd been carrying for so long comes crashing down on him at once. So, in a way, his abstraction isn't really a monster attacking him from outside. It's the final collapse of someone who spent way too long carrying things he never let himself process. The armor that kept him alive was also the thing keeping all that pain frozen in place, and once it cracked, there was nothing left to hold it back. Now, I want to talk about the scene that, for me, lands the hardest emotional punch of the whole finale. Toward the end, Kane, full of regret for everything he put everyone through, shows them all who they really were. Everyone gets their answers. Everyone discovers their real name, their human face, their actual story out in the world. Everyone finally gets closure after all these years. Everyone except JAX, because by the time this moment arrives, he's already abstracted. He's not there to see it, and the silence around that absence is louder than any big dramatic moment the show could have given us. And this leads into what I genuinely think is the cruelest irony of the entire ending, and it's the part that stuck with me the most. For years, JAX lived believing he was a failure. He carried himself like someone who had already lost, like someone who didn't deserve good things. But it turns out he was wrong. In the real world, his name is Leroy Mateo. And yes, he spent some months on the streets, but his story didn't end there. He eventually moved in with a close friend, found a steady job, managed to pay his rent, and built a real life. He and his friends go out together often, and in this strangely beautiful little detail, one of the places they hang out at is a bar owned by Riley, who is the real-world version of Zubul. His life actually got better. He found stability, he found friends, he found a place where he belonged. But he never got to find out. We know it. The other characters eventually know it, but he doesn't. He was left holding only the worst part of his story, the defeat, the running, the guilt, and he never learned that everything he was so sure he'd failed at had quietly turned out okay. So, is this really the end of JAX? Physically, yeah, it is. The JAX we knew disappears, and the show doesn't soften that. But emotionally, I think the final episode proves something we never would have guessed at the start. Underneath all the arrogance, all the jokes, all the cruelty, there was always someone who just wanted to connect with other people and never knew how. Because here's the truth at the center of all of it. JAX spent the entire series running away from people, hiding behind jokes, sarcasm, and cruelty. But in the end, the moment that defined him wasn't one of those masks. It was the moment he finally told someone the truth. And maybe that's what makes his ending so heartbreaking. Not that he abstracted, but that he finally became vulnerable right before losing the chance to see how his story truly ended. There is something genuinely painful about that timing, because the show gave us years of JAX being the person who pushes everyone away, and then, in the final moments, it showed us exactly why he was doing it the whole time. The cruelty was never the real him. It was just the only language he knew for keeping people at a safe distance, and by the time he learned a different one, it was almost too late. So maybe JAX's real victory was never about surviving the circus. Maybe it was simply that after all those years, he finally let someone in. I'd really love to know how you saw him. Did your view of JAX change by the end? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.